Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Korolov. I'm a technology journalist, and this past week I gave a keynote speech about generative artificial intelligence at the Seminarium Peru Data and AI Summit. And I had a great time. The conference was sold out, and like I said, I was a keynote speaker. There's me on the stage there, that little figure. Packed audience. Here's a little close-up of me talking. Not a flattering photograph, but what do you expect in a conference hall? Okay, so a lot of fun, but in case you missed it, because Lima's far away, if you live in the United States like I do, here is kind of a long recap of the presentation that I did. Obviously, you're not going to have the Q&A. You're not going to have the chance to come up to me afterwards and ask follow-up questions, although feel free to email me or ask in the comments below. And you're not going to get a chance to socialize with the other attendants or see the other speakers, but that's what you get for not going to the conference. All right, let's get into it. So the conference is titled Beyond ChatGPT, The Road to AI Impacts, Risks, and Challenges. And the reason I was invited to speak is because I am an award-winning technology journalist. I've been covering technology for over 20 years, starting with Computer World during the dot-com boom. And I went to all the conferences. I talked to all the companies about how they were transforming, with the internet and everything. And then since then, I've covered China's economic transformation. I covered cybersecurity. And for the past few years, I've been covering artificial intelligence. And for the last couple of years, generative artificial intelligence. And I've spoken to hundreds of people, executives of companies, experts, analysts, consultants, vendors making the stuff, everybody in the space about what's actually happening on the ground, what's working, what isn't working, and where people see that things are going. And so as a journalist, as a science fiction author, as an editor, I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm in the crosshairs of generative AI myself as well. So I have a very personal vested stake in finding out exactly what's going on and how this is going to affect everybody. And this is what my presentation was about. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about how we got here. I'm going to be covering security risks because in Peru, the audience was technologists. And I'm going to be talking about best practices for enterprises going forward. So let's talk about how we got here. Quick recap of the state of AI. It started out with expert systems. So millions of years ago, or 50, 60 years ago, we had if-then kind of statements. If this happened, do this. And if this other thing happened, do this other thing. This is how calculators work. This is how a game-playing checkers machine would work. This is how pretty much all software works. And expert systems that are designed to answer, say, corporate questions have to be very carefully programmed with the help of subject matter experts. And if anything changes, the decision trees break and have to be fixed. And they also have a hard time handling rare events that weren't part of the original expert, decision tree. Then from there, we went on to machine learning, which is statistics-based. So where people say AI is just autocomplete, that's what they're talking about, machine learning. It's predictive analytics. It's also natural language processing, optical character recognition, your Amazon recommendations, your Netflix recommendations. These systems require large, carefully curated data sets, and it requires really smart data scientists to create the models and fine-tune the models and manage the models because you get model drift. And this is something that generally only the biggest companies could do. Then we got into neural networks, which is a kind of machine learning that's a little bit smarter and can come up with new things in a kind of a limited way. So the big example of this was Google's AlphaGo, and it kind of mimics humans' brains' ability to recognize patterns. It's used for machine vision, self-healing networks. It does require lots of labeled training data. This is a cat, this is a dog. This is a cat, this is a dog. This is a cat, this is a dog. And if suddenly you ask it, what is this? And you show it a picture of an elephant, it has trouble like figuring that out. These are very difficult to build. They're difficult to fine tune, difficult to understand, and again, require massive amounts of labeled training data. This is where people sit and label things. If you do the CAPTCHAs, we'll like click on everything that has a truck. That's for training these things. Okay, then we get to generative AI. The big paper that set everything in motion was 2017 by Google researchers called Attention is All You Need. This is the paper that you want to read if you're a giant nerd and you want to know how all this got started. And it really took off in 2022 with DALL-E 2, Midjourney, and ChatGPT. It's capable of understanding concepts. And I'm putting understanding in quotation marks because a lot of people disagree about whether a computer can actually understand anything, and is the computer actually, giving you answers, or does it just look like it's giving you answers? As far as I'm concerned, it's an irrelevant distinction. Acts like a duck, talks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So for the purposes of, is my job going to disappear, whether or not understanding is used in a semiotically correct way doesn't really make much of a difference. It looks like it understands things. It requires, once you have a foundational model, it requires minimal additional training to do absolutely brand new things. And I'm going to talk about some examples of that. And you can interact with it in plain language. And then you can actually even fine tune it with small data sets. For example, ChatGPT can be fine tuned with just 50 question and answer pairs. And these things create original text, code, images, and video. So these took the world by storm. Well, you know what happened. 2022, we had image generation with DALL-E 2, Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion. In 23, we had text, code, and audio. This year, we're getting video, 3D objects, and autonomous agents. Very spooky. And I'll go into that a little more detail later. But this stuff is moving faster than anything else I've ever written about. So the rule of thumb, aka Moore's law, is that technology doubles in capacity and power every couple of years. With generative AI, it seems to be doubling every 3 to 6 months. And it's one of those things where every new advancement in generative AI makes the next advancement quicker and easier. So if you're pointing to something in generative AI and saying, oh, look, AI can't do X, it can't do Y, and it can't do Z, wait 3 months, right? That's what I'm saying. Wait 3 months, and then, you might have to rethink your position on this. So for example, this is what image generation looked like in March 2022. Kind of vaguely cat-like, nightmarish, right? And then 8 months later, this is what it looked like. So the amount of progress it made is insane. And the same pace of change is happening in text, in code, in video, in audio, in 3D, in every field people are applying generative AI to. So remember these two slides. So whenever you think, oh, generative AI is like this, it's like this cat, it's barely even recognizable. It's going to look like this. Okay? For everything. It's massively, massively fast. The way it's changing. I'm floored by this. Everybody who's involved in it is floored by how fast it's moving. And the reason it's moving so quickly is because there are none of the traditional brakes on it. So traditionally, Technology moved slowly because you needed physical infrastructure. You needed power lines, phone lines, server rooms. People had to buy computers, right? People had to set up internet connections, had to make sure they had phone plans. And in order to do this stuff, they need a great deal of expertise, college degrees, computer skills. Like in the early days of the internet, you had to have a computer that was good enough to use a modem to log into the web, right? Um, and it took specialized skills to learn how to do it. Getting electricity out to people. I mean, one of the first big technological changes. That was a huge infrastructure project. Infrastructure projects take a long time to do. Generative AI doesn't need any of this. All you need is an internet connection, and pretty much everyone on the planet has a smartphone or has access to one. Smartphones can be had for a few bucks, and they do 90% of what a $1,000 smartphone will do, running the Android operating system. I mean, you get the internet, that's the main thing, and you can get onto ChatGPT and a whole bunch of other large language models, many of which are available for free and can speak your language. And similarly, anybody can deploy their own open source AI just by pulling down one of the many, many open source large language models out there right now, fiddling with it, and uploading their own version, building a business on top of it. Cloud services start out free or super low cost, so you can deploy a little model up there. And if people want to pay you for it, you can expand and grow your company. And this is available to anybody on the planet. And it doesn't require any technical skills that you can't learn online for free. Everybody's starting out as a newbie with generative AI. And it speaks English or whatever your language is. It can understand plain text. So you can talk to it and massage it and create custom GPTs and fine tunings and all that stuff without necessarily having a lot of technical skill. And people are doing it. And people are doing it at a very fast pace. So I want to talk about a little bit about autonomous agents because those are going to be huge this year. They actually started out last year with Baby AGI and AutoGPT. And basically the idea is you take ChatGPT or another large language model and you use it for the reasoning. You add some memory to it. You add an orchestration layer. And you wind up with something like a system that can make a plan, do some background research, figure out what tasks need to be done, delegate those tasks, follow up to make sure they're done right, test them, repeat them if necessary, and keep doing this until it accomplishes its overall goal. And within the last couple of weeks, we had Microsoft's AutoDev released and Cognition's Devon released. And these are pitched as AI-powered software engineers. So they can do like everything that a software engineer can do. They can write code, debug it. They can, like I said, delegate tasks, do research. They can look up the APIs. They can look up the README files. They can analyze the source code, all the things. And a lot of people looked at the demos and were absolutely terrified, especially if they were software engineers. Other people looked at the demos and said, yeah, but they're really limited. They can only have so much memory. They can only handle so much. But remember, everything's changing really, really, really quickly. I mean, the NVIDIA conference last week, NVIDIA talked about their massive processors that releasing that are more energy efficient, that can do way more processing at way more quickly, specifically for AI. So all of this stuff is going to accelerate. All of this stuff is accelerating, and it's just insane. Next year, we're expected to be getting world simulations. And this is what OpenAI talked about in their last paper. And a world simulation, instead of having just text, just video, just audio, just computer code, it combines everything together with physical data, with physics and science and all of human knowledge, and it creates a model of the entire world with a common sense understanding of how the world works. And by using videos for training as well, it can understand how people interact with the world and the direction in which time moves. Because if you saw the Sora, OpenAI's new video generator, the Sora had a little bit of problem figuring out if people ran forwards or backwards. So if it has a common sense understanding of the world, that's going to be an issue that's going to be resolved. And this is a big step towards AGI, which is artificial general intelligence, which is an AI that has as much smarts and common sense and flexibility as a human. So this is super scary, interesting if you're a science fiction writer or a journalist. And this is going to change the way businesses work. And every business leader understands this. They know where this is going because they've lived through the dot-com boom. They recognize that this is a transformative technology. I mean, maybe if you're outside of tech, you're looking at this, you're looking at the first picture of that cat that's all twisted, and you're going, why is anybody excited about this? This is so stupid, right? But if you're in the middle of it, if you're actually deploying it, if you're running pilot projects with it, you can see the potential and you're terrified, you're in awe, and you start racing to get ahead of it, to try to learn as much as you can about it. Because if you don't transform your own company, somebody else will do the transforming for you. And here are some adoption statistics. So I have picked the biggest studies, the most recent studies by the most reputable companies, because anybody can survey like 12 people and get pretty much any data that they need. So this study, for example, is over 11,500 employees from countries around the world, and was published in December of 2023. So this is a recent study. All the links to these studies are in the description box below. And according to the study, 57% of employees are using generative AI every week. All right. So 45% of CEOs say that their companies won't survive if they don't change as a result of things happening in the world, including the technological changes. And this is from a survey of nearly 3,000 global CEOs by PricewaterhouseCoopers. This is a survey by IDC, International Data Corp, which is one of the most reputable research firms out there. It's based on a survey of over 2,100 business leaders, and it was published. When was this published? I'm in trouble reading this. It was published, November 2023. All right. And basically what it said, that companies that invested $1 in generative AI got $3.50 back, which is an insane return on investment. And I talk to companies, that have made AI work and who didn't make AI work. And the ones who are making it work, yeah, they're getting a big return back. And there's some low-hanging fruit that everyone is jumping on that they're getting a lot of return on. Okay, and as a result, in another survey of over 1,200 CEOs, 93% of company leaders are either already using generative AI or are planning to. And where generative AI is adding the most value already and is expected to do so in the near future is information technology, like coding assistants, marketing and PR, writing press releases, website copy, customer service and call centers. And I've talked to a lot of companies that are already using it here, not just for better chatbots, but for better support for call center agents, giving them all the information that they need when they need it, pulling it out of all the corporate documents and everything else, really speeding up how fast they can answer customer questions. Companies are also using it for sales and business development, business strategy and tactics, and supply chain management. I want to talk about some myths regarding artificial intelligence that I'm seeing floating around a lot, mostly from people two of the myths from people trying to dismiss AI. Oh, this isn't anything you should worry about because it's not really that useful, or and then another one that's going too far in the other direction. All right, so the first one, I mentioned this already, it's just autocomplete on steroids, which is true of machine learning. And yes, so generative AI is an evolution of machine learning. So technically, it is predicting the next word based on the words that have come before. So it's easy to think it's just autocomplete. All it can give you is what it's already seen. And so technically that's true, but the way it works is that it's not just looking for patterns between words. It's looking for the patterns behind those patterns, and the patterns behind those patterns behind those patterns, and the patterns behind the patterns behind, etc. Right? So for example, if you ask the AI a question, and then you tell it to think through things step by step, it will give you a better answer. It's so according to some research papers that I've read, when when a generative AI is dealing with a complicated problem, it basically creates kind of like its own on-the-fly little machine learning system to try to figure it out. It's doing the computer version of thinking. And some more recent research have added that if a prompt adds an interior monologue to the description of what you want it to do, it will respond better. It will get better math results. It will do better on logical reasoning tests. Also very creepy, very, very creepy, but it's absolutely not just autocomplete anymore. It's gone way beyond that. And I'm going to give you a quick way to test that, which will also test that it's also creative. So this is a common myth I'm seeing. It's not creative. It just cuts and pastes from what it's seen on the internet. And so first of all, it scores better than humans on creativity tests. I mean, creativity is combining things in new ways, extrapolating from existing stuff, and like throwing some random stuff into the mix and seeing what happens. Generative AI is good at all three of those types of creativity, which covers pretty much most of what human creativity is, except for like divine intervention. And that's like a discussion I'm not going to get into. So I'm going to give you an example from my own experience, but you can do the same test in whatever field that you're working on. So I use Claude AI. It's from Anthropic, and it does not use your stuff for training data. So that's an important thing. And it has a context window of 200,000 tokens, which is about 150,000 words, which is a very, very long novel. And as a novelist, I happen to have several unpublished novels sitting around because I haven't gotten around to publishing them yet. Nobody has seen these. Nobody on the internet has analyzed them, has figured out the themes in the novels, has pointed out the problems and the plot holes. Nobody's done this because nobody else has seen this novel. I mean, a couple of beta readers have seen it, but they haven't published anything about it on the internet because, you know, we have a pledge of confidentiality in my writers group. Okay, so I gave ChatGPT the novel. You can just upload a text file. And I said, okay, look at this novel. Tell me what the main themes are. And my novel is kind of complicated. It's set in a virtual world in the future, but the world itself is pretending to be 1500s England, but it's not a magical fantasy world. It's a kind of like a quasi-realistic 1500s world, but not really, only when it's convenient to the owners of the world. And there isn't really a game in there that people play. They're just kind of like wander around doing random stuff, kind of like Second Life. Which is I used to write about Second Life, so I'm like I based the world on that idea. So it's hard enough to explain this to a fellow human because it's a kind of a really weird premise, right? I don't see many books like that out there. Claude AI was able to figure out what my trends were, what my themes were, the questions of human identity, you know, what meaning of life, and blah blah blah, all that stuff. Then I asked it what my big plot holes were. Now, this is a book that's gone through several beta readings. It's gone through an editing process. So I was feeling pretty happy about it. And Claude found a bunch of plot holes, including a big one about the fact that the villain's motivation was missing for most of the book. So for readers, they were like, "What the heck's going on in this book? Why is the villain doing everything they're doing? It makes no sense." It was right. I mean, I knew what the villain was doing and why because I wrote it. So I kind of like see into its head. My writing group knew what the villain was doing because they were following me along in the process, along all this time. So like all of us missed this. And it found a whole bunch of other smaller um plot holes. And I asked Claude, okay, so which do you think is the most important one to address? Because I want readability. I want people to come back and read my next book. I don't want people to drop the book in the middle. And it said, based on your themes and your goals, this is the plot hole you should fix, namely the villain's motivation. And I said, well, given my book's themes and the character arcs that Claude also, gave me, give me a bunch of ideas for how to fix this plot hole. And it gave me a bunch of ideas for how to fix the plot hole that made sense in the context of my book. And I'm like, I don't like most of them. Number 3 sounds good. Give me a bunch of variants of number 3 that involve this character and that involve this and that involve that. And it continued to expand on that. Now, this is original reasoning. It's not copying it from the internet because it doesn't exist on the internet anywhere. This is something new it came up with after reading and analyzing my book. And it did so in seconds. And this is early. We're just barely a little over a year into it. So yeah, this is moving so fast. This is evolving so quickly. These AIs are getting so smart. And this is only the very, very, very early stages. All right, so let's move on to the last myth. The myth, and I'm seeing some companies starting to do this, that generative AI can just replace a human employee, and they're laying off employees. IBM just laid off a bunch of people because they said that AI is coming. We're not going to need them anymore. And so today, an employee's job is composed of multiple tasks, some of which an AI knows how to do today, but a lot of it doesn't. Maybe it can help you with those tasks, but it can't do the full task. So if you want to add generative AI to that job, whether ChatGPT or anything else, you're going to need some custom training, fine tuning, and probably some substantial process reengineering to integrate it into the workflow. And then you still need the human for everything else. If you just lay off the human, you're going to lose all that institutionalized knowledge, all that expertise, and it's not going to go well. Okay, so here is a quick roundup of what its current limitations are. So right now, it doesn't know what it doesn't know. Right now, it's prone to hallucinations and inventions. Right now, it only has a rudimentary grasp of physics and biology and a lack of common sense. It's not as good as the best human experts, and it definitely requires human in the loop. But again, right now, like I said, everything's changing quickly. A lot of companies are working on adding fact checking, are adding real-time data sources to it, adding more common sense, all those things. So all those things are probably coming, but right now they're not there yet. So if you plan to lay off your staff and replace them all with ChatGPT, you cannot currently do it. All right, now let's get on to the security risks of generative AI. And one of my beats that I cover is cybersecurity. So I have been writing about quite a bit about the cybersecurity implications of generative AI. And the first implication of generative AI is that public chatbots are trained on interactions with people. This helps them get smarter quicker. But that means that everything somebody tells a chatbot, the chatbot then knows. So if you upload your company's secret evil plan in order to turn it into a nice PowerPoint presentation, say, the chatbot then knows your company's secret evil plan. And when somebody asks the chatbot, hey, have you heard that that company has a secret evil plan? ChatGPT will say, why, yes, I happen to have a PowerPoint presentation about it right here. What do you want to know? I got it all. So you don't want to upload that stuff to a public chatbot that's trained on user data. And another problem with using public chatbots, or actually this is true for any cloud-based chatbot, especially when employees use personal computers, is if there's a virus on the computer, a hacker might be listening into those conversations. So, if a company like prohibits ChatGPT at work and doesn't give employees a safe, secure, no loss of training data kind of company grade ChatGPT to use, they're going to go to their personal devices like their phones, and they're going to use the public ChatGPT, and their conversations can be listened in on, and they can turn over all this information. So trying to shut it down will often backfire on companies. Next, hackers are using ChatGPT. So when ChatGPT came out in the late November 2022, I went on the Russian dark web discussion boards because I speak Russian, so I can read these things. And all the hackers were talking about how to get into ChatGPT, even though it's geo-blocked. And there's ways you can buy access to get the confirmation sent to a cell phone number, and you use a VPN and all these other tricks you can get into. But some of the hackers were saying, yeah, that's all nice, but ChatGPT is kind of limited. Let's wait for the open source version to come out that is going to have no restrictions at all. And they were right. Open source versions of ChatGPT came out very quickly that had 0 restrictions. If you want a chatbot to tell you how to write malware, it will tell you how to write malware. If you want to tell you how to build a nuclear bomb, it will tell you how to build a nuclear bomb. So yeah, so they're out there. And what they're using it for is smarter business email compromise attacks. So if a hacker gets into your company's email system, say they have your password and login from one of your employees' credentials were compromised, they get into their email, they can see how the employee talks, who they interact with, feed those past emails into the generative AI, and ask it to generate more emails in the same style, in perfect English grammar, and hijack that email correspondence to respond to people in order to get them to do things that they might not ordinarily do, like send money to some random guy in North Korea. They're also using it to create AI-powered malware and scans, better phishing emails and spear phishing emails, and they do use it for voice and video impersonations. So they would call up somebody's grandma and say, hey, I'm your grandson, I'm in jail, send me money. So it's not just grandparents that are potential victims. A financial manager in Hong Kong was on a Zoom call with the CFO of his company and other employees that the financial manager recognized. It was a video call. They could interact with the guy. And the financial manager was told to send an urgent wire transfer for 25 million. And since all these people were on the call, the financial manager was convinced that it was legit, went outside proper channels, and sent out the money. And it went to a bunch of hackers because this was all faked. So yeah, so this is happening now. Welcome to the brave new world. Yeah, so be prepared. Make sure that people know, don't go outside of channels. Get multiple levels of approval of everything. Don't just take the word for somebody on the Zoom call or in a text message or a WhatsApp, or in an email from their personal account. Yeah, be really careful. Watch out for all of these things. Don't listen to anyone who says it's an emergency that they have to go outside of channels. Okay, so generative AI has other security risks as well because of the expanded attack surface. Companies do want it to be more accurate, so they want to feed data into it. using vector databases and knowledge graphs. All of those information sources can be potentially hacked into. They will often use APIs to connect business applications to back-end foundation models. And all those communications messages back and forth are done via APIs, application programming interfaces. And if those are exposed, then hackers can try to reverse engineer them, get into them, and use them to siphon data out of the company. Companies are writing brand new applications to take advantage of what generative AI can do. And whenever a new application is written, there's often business logic issues in it. And the bad guys can take advantage of security holes and business logic problems to take advantage of those applications. And there's also internal threats. Say, for example, you have a human resources AI that answers questions about your earnings and benefits. And it doesn't know which questions it's supposed to answer and which questions it's not supposed to answer. And an employee can say, oh, how much is this other guy making? How much is she making? How much is he making? And the AI is going to be helpful and answer all those questions because it knows that answer. So you have to make sure you have authenticated access to all information and have the information be separate from the LLM. Like keep it in a vector database. Don't train the AI on it. The AI should not know this information. It should just get it when it needs it and only if the user is properly authenticated. Another possible internal threat is people just worried about losing their jobs and throwing a monkey wrench in the gears. There's lots of potential problems that employees can cause if they're disgruntled. So change management is really, really important here. Okay, so and another risk is betting everything on one vendor. We saw this happen with OpenAI. They fired their CEO, Sam Altman, last fall. And for several days, it looked like the whole company was going to disappear because all the employees said they were going to quit. They brought Sam back and they, got rid of the board members that kicked him out, and they did all this stuff to kind of make it more secure. But the problem is startups. Startups come and go. Startups are flaky. This can happen to any startup anywhere. And even existing companies can discontinue products. I mean, Google's discontinuing products all the time. So if your company bets everything on a particular AI model, that AI model can go away tomorrow. Plus, new AI models keep coming out. They're twice as good as the previous ones. Every couple of months, you get a new AI model that's twice as good. So if you're locked into the previous one, you're going to be missing a model that's twice as good and half the cost, right? And then legal and regulatory changes are coming. So a particular model might not comply with regulations. For example, it might not pay for its training data, and laws may require it, or it may violate people's privacy. So it may have to be pulled back so that it gets retrained from scratch. And while it's being retrained, you can't use it. So that's a big risk for companies that are just starting to invest in generative AI. So there's a couple of ways to avoid lock-in, but both of them involve making sure you can use multiple models easily on the back end so that you have the API layer separate from the business logic layer. Don't expose it to your developers. Keep it part of kind of the model garden or the model playground, and automatically pick the correct model for any particular task. Because some models are faster and cheaper. Some models are slower and smarter. Some models are particularly good at particular industry verticals, like healthcare or legal. Some models are better at math. So you may want to use different models for different tasks. Some models are open source and you can run them on-prem, basically for free. And you can customize them. So there might be plenty of different reasons to use different models. So be model agnostic. Have a system in place so that you can switch models in and out when another model is better or cheaper or more appropriate to a particular task. Let's talk about some fun examples of AI in the news. These are companies who got things wrong. So, for example, Air Canada's chatbot promised a customer something that the company couldn't deliver. The customer went to court. The customer won. The airline argued that the ChatGPT was not that the chatbot was not speaking on behalf of the company; it was speaking on its own behalf, and that the customer should have known that it wasn't given the correct answer because elsewhere on the website it had the correct information. And the judge was like, "But the chatbot was also on the website. How's the customer supposed to know that one part of the website is accurate and another part isn't? And also, doesn't this chatbot like work for you?" So yeah, you're responsible for it. The company had to pay $650 refund plus legal fees, and of course they got some bad publicity. In another case, a delivery company, DPD, its chatbot started swearing and called itself useless and criticized the company it was supposed to be working for because a customer asked it to be like that. Because chatbots are designed to be friendly and helpful. um, there was the famous case of lawyers who used ChatGPT to create legal filings that had made up cases in it, and they had a $5,000 fine and bad publicity. And then Michael Cohen, Trump's lawyer, former lawyer, also used AI and also came up with some bogus legal cases. Because again, the AI is trying to be helpful. If the cases don't exist, it'll make them up for you because it's creative that way. Yeah, so nice. Samsung employees accidentally leaked company secrets because they use ChatGPT. Again, don't use public chatbots. Instead, offer secure enterprise-grade options. For example, if you like ChatGPT, you can run it in a private instance on an Azure cloud. This ChatGPT is your own version of it. It doesn't talk back to the mothership. It doesn't use your training data to train the master ChatGPT. Everything stays private and confidential. It costs a little bit more, but it's more secure. And then provide training to employees about how to use the ChatGPTs, which ChatGPT you should be using, what it's appropriate for, what not, and then track and block unapproved uses. But you can only track and block unapproved uses if you have an approved chatbot, because otherwise employees will just use their personal devices and there's not much you can do to track those. A supermarket had a chatbot that you would upload a list of ingredients that you had in the house. Like, I have some turkey leftovers and I have some spinach. What can I make with it, right? And it would create a recipe. And it generated like ideas for ant poison sandwiches and poison gas, because of course people uploaded crazy ingredients because people are crazy. And this was super embarrassing. But as far as I can tell, nobody died or took these recipe suggestions seriously, and the supermarket quickly fixed it. But sometimes people do die. A Tesla worker was killed in a fiery crash because of full self-driving mode that wasn't actually full self-driving. And Cruise, which makes robotaxis, dragged a woman 20 feet after she was pushed into the car. So kind of unpleasant. So yeah, misuse of AI can actually hurt or kill people. So yeah, something to watch out for. So test a lot before you deploy these things. Limit the scope of the operation. Maybe don't let people use self-driving mode on roads with a lot of pedestrians or other cars. Keep the knowledge base current, because training data gets stale really quickly, so have access to an up-to-date vector database or knowledge graph. So right now, you do need to ensure human oversight whenever mistakes are costly. Do post-launch feedback and testing. Don't just put it up and forget about it, because things are going to turn up that you didn't expect. And plan for errors and mistakes. Have a contingency plan in place. Have a disaster plan in place for when things go wrong. so you don't panic and run around like a chicken with its head cut off when something bad happens. All right. Then I'm going to talk about disruption risk of generative AI. How at risk is your company, industry, or job? And we're coming a little, close to the end of the hour here, so I'm going to try to speed up. So mainly the disruption is the expert value. If you have informational value in your company, you've probably already been disrupted or are about to be as soon as somebody notices that you haven't been disrupted yet. Like if you're an encyclopedia company or a dictionary company or a Blockbuster or anything like that, where you're selling information or you're transmitting information. So television was disrupted by YouTube, but Netflix, everything that's transmitting information, keeping information bottled up, selling information, collecting information, all those things were affected by the internet. And people moved into either selling information on a commodity scale, so making it lower cost, more widely available, and really leading into the internet, or they leaned into their expert value. We're special, we're New York Times, we can charge for our newspaper. We're a high-end consulting company. We know things. We know what you should do with this information. So they were selling their expertise. Well, now with generative AI, that expertise is being disrupted because the AI can tell you what to do with that information. So people who are experts are expert programmers, expert writers, expert artists, medical professionals, legal professionals, financial professionals, human resources professionals, marketing and sales professionals. So anybody whose value is their expertise is going to be disrupted by generative AI. Any company for whom a big chunk of its business value proposition is its expertise is going to be disrupted. Any industry that's heavily based on expertise is going to be disrupted. For example, the consulting industry, which is a $1 trillion industry, is 100% going to be disrupted, and they're pouring billions into figuring out what generative AI can do because their entire business model is on the chopping block. Then you've got physical value. This is like your physical location, physical products that you sell or deliver, or physical services that you provide. That's going to take longer to disrupt because it takes a lot of infrastructure to do a physical disruption. I mean, we still have countries that aren't fully industrialized yet because building a factory takes a lot of time. Building robots and installing them and getting them to work takes a lot of time. So this stuff is probably going to be more than 5 years. It's coming, but the physical disruptions take a very, very long time because you have to invest quite a bit in equipment. And finally, emotional value is the lowest risk because that's something that the AI can not currently do because we know that the AI isn't real. We know that our Tamagotchi pet is not an actual pet. And as soon as we get bored with it, we stop playing with it and we let it die. And we really don't care because we know it's not real. When the Duolingo owl tells me to practice my Spanish, I just ignore it because I know it's not a real owl. If it was a real owl, I would pay attention to it because like, oh my God, my poor owl, needs my attention. But if it's a virtual one, we know it's not real. So there's people like getting involved with like virtual girlfriends and stuff. But when a better virtual girlfriend comes along, they're going to switch over because they know it's not real unless they have actual psychological issues. So let me give you an example of business case we all know, a restaurant. So it has expert value, experts, management, marketing. They know what the food trends are. They know your order or delivery history. They know customer preferences. They have some expertise. That part of it might be disrupted by generative AI. They have physical value, the food and beverages they deliver, their location, the decor, the ambiance, table service, takeout counter, home delivery. Now, this stuff people like having. People like going out to eat. If they wanted to stay home and eat, they could get a frozen meal. It's probably the same frozen meal that the restaurant's going to heat up, that they bring out to you. But it tastes better when somebody else brings it to you. It feels special when you go out to eat to a physical location. You get to meet people. It's all nice and stuff. We like that. We like the physical aspect, the leaving our house aspect of it. So if this stuff was going to be disrupted, would have been disrupted in the 1950s where people had the automats. People didn't like that. And so I think that a lot of this stuff is going to stay and it's going to be safe. Possibly some of it will be disrupted, like the cooks in the kitchen might have more automation, or delivery might have a little bit more automation, but it's going to be expensive and time consuming. So it's going to be at least 5 years out. And then the emotional value is why we go to the restaurant. The comfort, the attention, exclusivity and status, spending time with friends and family, relaxing. Oh, somebody else is doing everything for you and just bringing it for you because they care about you. You're part of their tribe, so they're feeding you. So we feel a very primal need to connect with people, and being out in a restaurant kind of fills that need, this deep emotional need. So if you can figure out what emotional need your company serves or you personally serve, you're going to be all set for the near future as well. So some deployment best practices, you want to have mature data model. This is old hat stuff, but still very relevant. Make sure it's comprehensive. It involves the cloud, and it's got modern data protection systems in place. You want to have model independence. I talked about this already. You want to have accuracy. And right now, to improve accuracy, you use customized and niche models. You fine-tune models for your specific business use case. You use vector databases, knowledge graphs, and other up-to-date information sources for embedding and grounding the models. And then you use prompt engineering to make sure that you're asking the right questions in the right format to create the optimal results. This will probably all change as the generative AI tools improve, because they will start to include more and more of this functionality in there. All right, you want to train your employees. You want to make sure they understand the risks, the benefits, what it can and can't do. You want to share knowledge and best practices and successful use cases. And you want to set up guardrails, company-wide ethical principles about the use of AI, and use those principles to decide which projects you're going to do and which projects you're not going to do. Use guardrails to protect sensitive information, and also have guardrails set up for cost overruns. With a lot of these generative AI, you pay per token, and costs can rack up really, really quickly. All right. So I talked a little bit about workflows, but I'm going to skip through all that. I'm going to put a link to the slides down below. I wanted to end by saying it's a level playing field. Nobody knows anything about what's going on. Open source LLMs and cloud-based LLMs make this accessible to everyone at a very low or free introductory cost. And cloud deployment makes the infrastructure available to everybody if you want to start a business. And everybody is desperate for applications of using generative AI. Companies want to get involved in it, and users want to get involved with this. Everyone wants to try it out and see what they can get from it. And nobody knows anything. We're all beginners. So if you're just getting into it, so is everyone else. All right. So I think that's it. I want to thank everybody. Here's my contact information, also going to be in the description box below. Before I go, there are a couple of questions that people asked me. One of them was that a guy was studying computer science, what's going to happen to his career? And I suggested leading into the psychology side of it, the human kind of element, the communication skills, the people skills, the soft skills. But also, you want to like upskill on the technical side as well. So maybe you might want to learn about generative AI, learn about vector databases, learn about embeddings and all those things. And then somebody else asked me that it costs a lot to develop a foundation model. Aren't smaller players locked out? And I want to tell you to go to the Hugging Face leaderboard, which is all open source platforms. And some of them are as good as the big commercial models. And they're free. You can download them, use them on your own computers. You can modify them. You can play with them. And they are getting a lot of training data because people are using them. a lot of vendors making apps on top of generative AI use open source platforms because they're free. So for example, you had a lot of image generators apps come out when you had the image generation going big in 2022. Almost all of those apps used Stable Diffusion on the back end, which is an open source version of DALL-E 2 and Midjourney, because the vendors, the people who were creating these apps didn't have to pay for it. So then they developed huge user bases. They would collect, I'm sure some of them collected that training data, what did people want to generate, which pictures did they prefer, all those things fed right back into the model, helped it grow. There's a ton of open source platforms out there, and some of them are really, really big. Twitter released one, sorry, X, Grok, which is trained on a Twitter data set. Facebook released one. Adobe has one trained on its own image data set, which is all fully licensed, and they pay their artists. That's not open source, but it doesn't have any copyright issues, so I wanted to mention them. All right, so that's it. That's it for me. It's been an hour, so I'm going to go. If you have any questions, like I said, email me, and all the contact information is going to be down in the description box below. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.